So I want to go back to being little Jill. I was probably a little bit bigger than that. And I was just a girl at school, and I noticed there was loads of people playing football. I was about 5 years old, and I remember thinking, I want to do that. So I joined in, started having a kick about. About 2 months later, I realised I was the only girl. Everyone was boys. I was playing football. I wasn't a very observant child. It was quite difficult in the beginning, if I'm being honest, from a time where I grew up with 3 siblings. Your parents couldn't take you to kind of every football and event, so I used to go with coaches, managers, friends. And I remember a lot of the time, the boys were quite accepting of us being able to play, so it was like, yeah, you can be on my team. But the parents, it was a little bit more difficult. So I remember playing, and kind of the parents shouting, break that girl's legs, because I'd nutmegged their precious son or something like that. So I'm 8, 9 years old, I'm playing, I've got tears running down my face. I go off the pitch, the manager tries to console me, trying to make sure I'm okay. But the only thing was, nothing was ever going to take football away from me. On a Tuesday, I'd pick my football boots back up, and off I'd go. So I think when people want to speak about resilience in journeys, I wasn't 8, 9 years old going, this is great, Jill, it'll build your resilience when you're older. I think it was something that was building inside of me. I noticed as I got a little bit older, I'd sit in football meetings. I was playing for Manchester City, and the manager would go pre-season, we're going to win the FA Cup, we're going to go for the league, we're going to go for the League Cup. And I never wanted to kind of plan too far ahead. I was a big believer in anything can happen day to day. And I was always a big believer in just be the best version of yourself, work so hard, look in the mirror at the end of each day and think, you know what, I couldn't have done any more today to be better. And no matter where my journey went, I was always going to be proud of that. Upon retirement, you do have time to reflect. And I think the reason that I've always done that is because as a young girl, my dream didn't really exist. And I was so scared that somebody was going to take away this dream that I had of being a professional footballer that I think I protected it. And that's why I never made these long-term goals. So that was a bit of a lesson, I suppose. As I got a little bit older, started playing for teams. It's one of them where you've got to be the best individual, but you've also got to be part of a really good team. So what I learned quite quickly was you have to understand to find your own formula. So in every walk of life, I think we're always constantly looking left, looking right, comparing ourselves to people, thinking, how can I be more like them? But I think you have to find what works best for you. So as my career went on, I was a big believer in kind of how do I become the best version of myself? And I played with a fantastic footballer, one of my great friends, and we met at Bolton Girls under 12s, and then we ended up playing for England together. She was England captain, played for Manchester City together for 8 years, Steph Houghton. But we were so different as people. So we had these very similar careers, but we were so different. I remember a game would finish, she'd be analysing her performance on a Saturday before a game on a Sunday. She'd be having a massage. I know she'd go home, she'd relax, she'd have the same pre-match meal. Such a very good professional. Whereas on a Saturday, I wanted to be around my friends. I was having a coffee. I wouldn't really analyse games because I'd step off the pitch and I'd know what I could have done better. And I think for pre-match, it was whatever was in my fridge half the time. But my point I'm making with that is I think if she tried to do what I did and I tried to do what she did, we wouldn't have gone on to have the careers that we had. And I use the analogy that if you go into the car park and you put petrol in all the cars out there, only maybe a third of them might move because some need diesel, some need electricity, but the goal is still to make the car move. So I think that was something that I did get quite good at. Now, if you've got a manager who's allowing you to do that, you've got to constantly be reflecting on your weeks and be accountable for your performance on a Sunday. So sometimes I'd have a bad game on a Sunday and I'd go, should I have gone to Nando's on Thursday? Should I have stayed out late on Tuesday? So the next week I wouldn't do that. And there was lots of times I was just rubbish and there was no explanation. I remember thinking I'd kind of started to become a professional footballer maybe when I joined Everton. I made my England debut at the age of 18, 19. Joined Everton and suddenly it was like, oh, we're going to get you a boot sponsor. So suddenly I was getting free football boots, and I thought I was brilliant. I remember it was called Nomus, this brand, and I'd get my football boots. I'd have 2 pairs. I made my England debut, and the manager went to us, have you got studs on? Because it's slippy out there. And I was standing on the sideline, and I was thinking, I've only got molds on. So I ended up spending my England debut shuffling around the pitch, thinking, just don't slip over. So these boots called Nomus, I realised a couple of years later, it was a guy called Simon who just put his name backwards on some boots. But you know what? I felt professional. I'd made my England debut, and I was very, very happy. So I think about being part of a team, and any job that you're in, I think the most important thing is that you should understand what is your why. Why do you wake up every morning? Why do you give your all to work? What is the reason why? And I was at a World Cup, I think it might have been 2015, and we shared our whys as a team. And one of the girls was like, well, every time we progress, quarterfinals, semi-finals, we'll get a little bit of a bonus, and I'd like a new kitchen in my house. So I remember we'd kind of progress and she'd be like, oh, I've got the kitchen counters, now I've got the bar stools or whatever. And I think some people were like, can you have money as a why? Well, I think you can have anything as a why. If it's something that motivates you, it's something that motivates you. And it goes back to my point of saying that everybody is different. A lot of people's answers was family. I remember one of the girls actually had children, and she spoke about how important it was. She was playing for England. She was there for our boys, fantastic player. And we were in, I think it was a bronze medal match, and we'd played 6, 7 games by that point. And I remember running up the wing, and I was absolutely knackered. And I looked up at the clock, and there was only 32 minutes gone. We ended up playing 120 minutes. But I remember in that extra time, I looked to my right, and I was like, I'm going to run this extra time for your boys. And I think that's what it's about, being part of a team. You understand about each other, so then you can give a little bit extra. And that was something I'm a big believer in. I think you should be able to sit next to somebody at work and not just talk about work. Take time to find out about the family, brothers, sisters. I remember a girl, her dad wasn't very well, so I would check in every morning, how's your dad? And I think it's really important that we build them relationships, because at work, you have to be able to tell people when things aren't going well as well. So if somebody was having a bad game at the end of it, I'd be like, you weren't good enough today. And I'd expect them to do the same to me. But in order for that to be coming from a good place, you have to make sure you build them relationships. And also praise people. We all know them people that come into work every single week. They're a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, consistent. But we'll never really give them that praise of, you know what, well done, you reached your target today. And I think it's so important that we keep doing that, so that when you do have to tell people that they haven't been so great, they know that you're not being nasty about it. It's because you're going towards this greater good. Now, in football, there's a fine, like, you have to make sure you don't get too high, don't get too low. So with a win, don't get too high. With a loss, don't get too low. And throughout my career, there's times when I can think about I did get too low with a loss, but I learned not to, because if I dropped too far down, I then couldn't get myself back up when I needed to be there for the team. FA Cup game at Wembley, we win, best day ever, champagne's all in the FA Cup, I'm drinking it. I'm from Sunderland. Great day, and there was a young girl playing, I think she was 18 years old, and she had the best game ever, and I'm like, you were amazing today, and she's just walking around, clapping the crowd. I'm like, why don't you seem so happy, celebrate? And she's like, well, you told me not to get too high and not to get too low. I'm like, no, this is a moment you can get high, not literally. But I think I had to be careful how I was passing them messages kind of down to the next generation. When I finished playing with the Lionesses, I actually think a lot of the younger players were quite happy, because I was the one that would go and sit at dinner, and I'd be like, everybody, phones away, let's talk to each other. Have you had a good day? What have you been up to? What do you appreciate about your teammate? And I think when I retired, some of the girls were like, thank God for that. I can just scroll through Snapchat, TikTok, and I don't have to have them conversations. So I've got to speak about the Euros. So I go back to being little Jill. Never, ever imagined I would play for England 161 times. what an honour, an absolute honour, and thank you. Thank you. You know what, though? I definitely can't take any credit. I've been around fantastic players, fantastic teammates, and I think it's one of them where I still pinch myself now. I got a tattoo, actually, which is it's meant to be a lioness. I think it looks half dog, half cat. When we'd won, and I said, come on, girls, let's all get a tattoo. I went first. They haven't got the tattoo, but I've got my cap number there and the date that we won the Euros at Wembley. And if I'm ever having a down day, I'll just glance down and it puts a big smile on my face. So that takes me to Serena Wiegman. What a manager. I've had some fantastic managers throughout my career. And when people say, how did you win the Euros? I think they think I'm going to put this really complicated formula up on the screen. But it's not. I think the thing with Serena was, she obviously works with a lot of different members of staff. And the one thing that I loved about her was she trusted every area of the staff. So I've had managers in the past where they want to kind of have the final say over the physio, over the doctor, over coach and staff. But she trusted everybody in their area. And I felt like that as a player as well. I knew I was coming to the end of my career. She said that I wasn't just there for team morale, and she really made us feel appreciated. She did say it was in the games, if we've ever got the win, I want you to kind of come into the game if we're winning and just kind of shut up shop and get us over the line. I don't know if she meant swearing at a German player in the final in front of 90,000 people, but she said, do what I have to do. I remember the Norway game, we were 6-0 up at half time, and I'm thinking it went 7-0, 8-0. I'm like, come on, Serena, you've got to give us a game now. But she had this great way of just making you feel appreciated. It was all black and white, no grey areas whatsoever. Team selection for the Euros. I wanted to be at that tournament more than anything. I was looking around the team. We had Lauren Hemp, Kira Walsh, Lucy Bronze. I was like, this team is going to win the Euros. I need to be there. And she was one of the first managers that actually did team selection face-to-face. So we've been at St. George's Park for around 3 weeks as a team. There was 28 of us. We knew it was going down to 23. We finished training, we'll walk up, and there's just 5 cars outside of St. George's Park. We'll get a message, you're going to have a one-on-one meeting. If you're not in the squad, you're going to go home. And I was like, oh my God, like it felt like X Factor or something. But the fact that you had the respect to have that meeting to your face, I think I drank 6 flat white coffees before I went in. I was shaking like this. She was like, are you all right? I was like, yeah, but am I going or not? So to get the answer yes was amazing. But at the same time, you knew 5 of your friends, teammates weren't going to be going, which obviously made it a sad experience as well. So moving on to the Euros, first day we get to the hotel, and it was just amazing being in England, all the fans. I step out of the hotel. Leah Williamson, England captain, said to us, do you want to go for a walk? I said, brilliant. So we'll go for a walk. She's on a billboard. We enter a shop. I buy a packet of crisps. Probably shouldn't have. She's on the front of the packet. Walk past the bus shelter. She's there. I wasn't on anything. But it was just so good to see kind of how big the Euros was going to be. So before the Euros, we always did that thing, and I'm sure you've done it in your workplace as well, where you go round and you say, like, what's our morals, what's our values, what we're going to stand to as a team. And it might be you walk into a room and you leave it how you found it. Don't leave any mess around. We wrote them all down, sign this bit of paper, that's what we're going to do. I remember having the meeting, and a lot of the girls, they didn't really seem like they were listening too much. Now, I love doing poetry, love it. Feel like it just empties my head at times. So I said, you know what, I'm going to put this all into a poem. Now, I'm not going to recite the whole thing because I don't have a lot of time. But I remember my end line of the poem was, we need to create an environment where everyone can thrive, because it's not the splash you remember, it's always the dive. And the splash will always be that gold medal, but the dive will always be the friends I've made along the way, the World Cups I've played in, the Euros, the Olympics, the fact I can meet the girls for a coffee, talk about all these amazing experiences. That's the thing that matters. So remember, whatever you're doing in life, if you're aiming for a target, I wanted to win something from the age of 5. And I'm so happy that I got that perfect ending in sport, because I know it doesn't happen that much. But the perfect ending, I always thought was going to be that medal. It's always going to be reaching that target. But make sure you enjoy the dive, because that's the memories that you'll remember. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, go on.